I'm a 44-year-old guy, and I've been married to my wife, who's 41, for 10 years now. We've been together for 13 years in total, and we're pretty happy with our life. We have an 8-year-old kid, and things are good. But before this marriage, I was married once before. I got married really young, at 22, but unfortunately, that marriage didn't last. It ended in divorce after 3 years, and to this day, I'm still not entirely sure why. My ex-wife, let's call her Amy, and I had been together since middle school. We were basically childhood sweethearts. After we finished college and got stable jobs, we decided to get married. At first, everything was great, but then, out of nowhere, things started to feel off. No matter how hard I tried to keep things alive between us, it seemed like she just wasn't interested anymore. A few weeks before our 3rd anniversary, she handed me divorce papers and said she was done. I tried everything to fix things and win her back, but she just told me she didn't love me anymore. That was her only explanation for ending things after all those years together. I was really upset, but there was nothing I could do. I didn't want to drag things out or make her stay if she was unhappy, so I agreed to the divorce. Since we didn't have much shared property, the process was pretty straightforward. After the divorce, she moved away and cut off all contact with me. I never saw or heard from her again. What made it even harder was that some of my own family members started distancing themselves from me around that time, which felt really strange and hurtful. I was going through a tough period, and instead of being there for me, they just pulled away. It was a really lonely time. After the divorce, I really tried to stay in touch with my family, but I found out they had blocked me on everything, phone, social media, you name it. I even went to their homes a few times, but my sister and parents wouldn't let me in. It hit me hard because it was so unexpected, and I was already struggling emotionally. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to do much of anything. I quit my job and spent months just staying at home, feeling lost. Thankfully, I had some amazing friends who stuck by me. They encouraged me to pick myself up and keep going, even when things felt impossible. They were the ones who looked out for me when my family wasn't there. Eventually, I decided to chase a dream I'd had for a long time, opening my own restaurant. I'd put it off during my marriage because I was saving money and thinking about Amy's needs. But after the divorce, I figured it was time to go for it. I even named the restaurant something my parents had suggested years ago, even though they weren't in my life anymore. My friends helped me connect with some investors, put together a business plan, and get everything off the ground. It took about 4 years after the divorce, but I finally opened my own restaurant. A couple of years later, I met my now wife. We were introduced through mutual friends at an event, and she mentioned how much she loved my restaurant. We hit it off, started dating, and after 3 years, I proposed. I was ready to give love another shot, and now, 10 years later, we're happily married with an 8-year-old son. Things have turned around in my career too. That first restaurant was just the beginning. It did so well that we expanded over time, and now I run my own hospitality company. We have a chain of hotels and restaurants that are really popular, and I'm proud of how far we've come. We're even planning to grow further and hopefully make a name for ourselves beyond our state. Life's been good to me, and I'm grateful for where I am now. Getting to where I am today took a lot of hard work, and it hasn't been an easy journey. Recently, I agreed to do an interview because it felt like a sign that I'd finally made it. But I never expected it to cause such a huge stir in my life. The interview aired on a somewhat popular channel, and I didn't think my family would even see it. Even if they did, I never imagined they'd show up at my workplace. My office location isn't exactly a secret, so I guess it wasn't hard for them to find me. Still, it was completely inappropriate for them to show up unannounced and demand to see me while I was working. But that's exactly what they did 3 days ago. When the receptionist told me my family was waiting outside, I was confused. At first I thought she meant my wife and son, but that didn't make sense because my son was at school and my wife was at work. Then she clarified that it was my sister and parents. I was completely thrown off. I told the receptionist to ask them to leave for the time being and that I'd see them later. But they wouldn't take no for an answer and started causing a scene, so I had no choice but to step in. I didn't want security to have to escort them out, so I went to the lobby to talk to them. Seeing them after over 20 years was surreal. They acted like nothing had happened, like no time had passed at all. They immediately started praising me, saying how amazing it was that I'd achieved so much and how inspiring my story was. It felt strange hearing them say that because, in my mind, they hadn't been part of my life for so long. They even mentioned how they'd seen pictures of my family in the interview and started talking about how they wanted to meet my wife and grandson. I tried to brush it off, telling them I had to get back to work, but they kept pushing. It was awkward and overwhelming, to say the least. At that point, they actually had the nerve to scold me, saying I should have tried harder to reach out to them after the divorce. It was then that I realized this might be my chance to finally get some answers about what had really happened all those years ago. Instead of telling them to leave, I decided to hear them out, hoping for some closure. I even sat down with them in the lobby to listen. And that's when I found out the truth, why my family had abandoned me and why Amy had left me. As you might have guessed by now, Amy had been cheating on me. And the shocking part? My parents had been helping her cover it up the whole time, which is why I never suspected a thing. They claimed they had their reasons, or at least what they thought were good reasons, so they asked me not to judge them too quickly. Turns out Amy had been having an affair with my cousin, Carl, who was the son of my dad's older brother. Once they finally told me, everything clicked into place. I finally understood why they had sided with her, why I hadn't been invited to any family gatherings in over 20 years, and why I'd been cut off without any explanation or fault of my own. I'd never liked Carl. He was always a rude, entitled brat, but everyone in the family let him get away with everything because his mom had passed away when he was just 6 months old. They used that as an excuse to never hold him accountable for anything. To make matters worse, Carl's dad, my uncle, was my dad's boss and had started the family business that my dad later joined. So, when Carl decided he wanted to be with Amy and she went along with it, my family felt they had no choice but to support them. They couldn't risk upsetting my uncle, but apparently they had no problem risking their relationship with me. And just like that, they chose to side with Carl and Amy, leaving me out in the cold. They also dropped another bombshell. My uncle had made it crystal clear during the divorce that no one in the family, not even my parents or sister, was allowed to have any contact with me. Apparently, when Amy announced she was pregnant with my child, my family tried to push back, but my uncle made it clear that if they ever wanted to be part of their grandchild's life, they'd have to cut me off completely. What's worse, I was never told that Amy was pregnant when she filed for divorce. She wasn't showing at the time, and she had already moved out long before the divorce was finalized. So I had no idea I had a child on the way. By the time my daughter was born, I was completely in the dark. Now, nearly 20 years later, my daughter believes Carl is her biological father, and she's never even met me. Hearing all of this from my parents felt like I was being told some twisted story. It was so hard to process that this was actually my life. I had to pinch myself to believe it was real. My family thought they were doing the right thing by securing their jobs and maintaining a relationship with their granddaughter, but to me, it just felt like cowardice. They could have told me the truth and let me handle it, but instead they were too afraid of my uncle, acting like he had some ultimate power over them. The truth is, my dad could have fought back legally, even if it meant leaving the family business. But they chose to take the easy way out. I still can't wrap my head around why they never told me about Amy's pregnancy or the fact that I have a daughter. They kept this secret for 20 years, only coming clean now because they saw I was doing well in life. Suddenly they felt guilty and wanted to make amends, but I saw right through it. When they finished telling me everything, I told them I needed them to leave. I didn't have it in me to forgive them right then and there. I tried to stay calm and polite since we were in my workplace lobby, and I didn't want to cause a scene. But I couldn't promise I'd always be that composed. What they did was unforgivable, and I'm still trying to process it all. As soon as I told them to leave, they started arguing, saying I should try to see things from their perspective and understand how hard the situation had been for them too. I told them straight up that I was sure they were only reaching out now because they wanted a piece of my success. They denied it, of course, but my sister even had the nerve to claim that they were the reason I'd become successful in the first place. She said it was because they came up with the name for my restaurant back when it was just an idea. I couldn't believe how bold that was, considering they hadn't lifted a finger to help me over the years. Everything I'd built was on my own, with the support of my friends, not them. Just because they suggested a name didn't mean they could take credit for my hard work. I actually laughed at how ridiculous it sounded. I warned them that if they didn't leave right away, I'd have security remove them. But they kept pushing, saying they wouldn't leave until we resolved things. I wasn't interested in hearing more, so I followed through on my threat and had security escort them out. As they were being led away, they were clearly upset and tried to convince me they'd had no other choice back then. But the truth is, they did have a choice. They just made the wrong one, and now they have to live with the consequences. They've managed just fine without me or my family for the past 20 years, so I'm sure they'll survive the next 20 without us too. Since then, they haven't stopped trying to contact me. It's been 3 days since the incident, and while they haven't dared to come back inside my workplace, they've been showing up outside, sending emails to my work address, and messaging me on social media. Their tone has definitely shifted. They're full of apologies now. They even wait outside my office, looking desperate, hoping I'll stop and talk to them. But I just drive past without acknowledging them. Honestly, I almost feel bad for them because of how pathetic it all seems. But after everything they've done, they've brought this on themselves. Honestly, I've talked this over with my wife because no matter how I handle things with my family, we still have to think about my daughter, who I just found out about a few days ago. We've been going back and forth on whether we should try to find her and reach out. On top of that, there's my family. They won't leave me alone until they get another chance to talk to me. My wife thinks maybe I should invite them over and try to work things out, just to clear the air and maybe ease some of the emotional strain. She believes it could help get rid of all the negativity, but honestly, I'm not really up for it. With everything I've just learned and what I'm dealing with right now, I don't have the energy to face them. I'd rather just keep ignoring them until they give up and leave me alone. It's been 20 years since we last spoke, and we're really struggling to figure out how to move forward. I keep wondering if I'm in the wrong for not wanting to give my parents another chance to talk. It's all just a lot to process. Update 1. It's been a little over a week since my first post, and my wife and I decided to keep ignoring my family. Thankfully, they haven't shown up at my workplace for the past few days. Maybe they're tired of trying or scared of security. Either way, it's been a relief not having them around, and it's made it easier for me to stop stressing over the situation. I think their constant presence was making me feel guilty about how I was handling things. But now that they're gone, I don't feel bad about ignoring their texts anymore. No matter how many times they apologize, it won't change anything. They've let me down as a family, and no amount of sorry can fix that. I'm not even bothering to block them anymore, even though they keep messaging me from different accounts and emails. What's the point? I'll just keep ignoring them, no matter how many times they try. We'll see how long they keep this up. Now, on to the other issue, my daughter. My wife and I are still unsure how to handle this. During the conversation with my parents, they mentioned where she goes to college, so we have her name. I haven't done anything yet, but my assistant found her social media profiles. I'm torn about whether it's even right for me to reach out to her, and if I do, I have no idea how to tell her I'm her biological father. I can't just show up at her door or demand anything. She's an adult, not a kid. Plus, after everything I've learned about Amy, her mother, I don't want her involved in this mess at all. I've lost all respect for her and my family. They're all cowards, and I want nothing to do with them. But my daughter is different. She's still my blood, no matter who raised her. If anyone has advice on how to approach her, or if I even should, I'd really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who commented on my first post. Your advice was so helpful, and I'm hoping you can guide me again with this. Update 2. After reading the comments on my last update, my wife and I decided to take the next step. We realized there's no perfect time to reach out to my daughter, so we just had to rip off the Band-Aid and do it. Since she lives in another state, we thought showing up in person wouldn't be the right move, so we sent her a message on Instagram instead. We tried to explain things as kindly and clearly as possible, and now we're just waiting to see if she responds. I know this is going to be hard for her to process. It's hard for me too, but I'm hopeful she'll be open to talking. I can't thank my wife enough for how supportive she's been through all of this. It's not easy dealing with something as complicated as reconnecting with a child from a past relationship, and I know it's bringing up a lot of emotions for both of us. We're doing our best to navigate this, and I really hope my daughter is willing to give us a chance to build a relationship. On the family front, my parents haven't shown up at my workplace in a while, which has been a relief. They sent me a long email yesterday, apologizing and saying they want to fix things between us. They asked for one more chance, but also said they'd wait for me to reach out to them before contacting me again. Honestly, I'm glad they finally seem to understand that I'm not ready to talk to them right now. The last thing I need is more drama added to everything else I'm dealing with. I hope they stick to their word and leave me alone unless I decide to reach out first. Though, at this point, that doesn't seem likely anytime soon. Knowing the real reason they cut me off for 20 years has made the hurt and betrayal even harder to shake. I don't think those feelings will go away for a long time, if ever. But there's at least one silver lining in all of this. I've learned about my daughter, and I'm holding on to hope that she'll want to reconnect. I haven't told my son about her yet because I don't want to get his hopes up in case she doesn't want to talk to us. But if things work out, he might gain a sister, and I might finally get to know the daughter I never knew I had. Right now, I'm feeling a mix of emotions, and I'm doing my best to manage everything one step at a time. Update 3. About 2 weeks ago, I reached out to my daughter on social media. I sent her a message explaining who I am and our connection. After waiting for what felt like forever, she finally replied today. She said she talked to her mom, Amy, about me and found out I'm her biological father. She was completely shocked. She had no idea Carl wasn't her real dad and had believed he was her father for the past 20 years. She also mentioned that after hearing the full story about how things ended up this way between her mom and me, she wants to meet me and my family. Since she can't afford to travel right now and isn't on speaking terms with her family, my wife and I are flying out to see her this weekend. She didn't go into too much detail, but it sounds like when she confronted Amy about it, her mom first tried to deny everything before finally admitting the truth. I'm really hoping Amy doesn't try to contact me because I have no interest in talking to her. So far, I haven't heard from her, and I'd like to keep it that way. On the other hand, my family broke their promise as soon as they found out I'd reached out to my daughter. They started trying to contact me again, and my uncle seemed especially upset that I'd found out the truth. I guess they're mad because they spent 20 years keeping this from me to avoid disrupting their lives. Honestly, it just shows how selfish they've been all along. For now, I'm focusing on meeting my daughter this weekend. It's a big step, and I'm nervous but also hopeful. I'll keep you all updated on how it goes. Thanks again for the support and advice. It's been a huge help through all of this. It turns out my uncle is pointing fingers at my parents, and my dad is still scared of his older brother, even though he doesn't work for him anymore and runs his own business. My dad's been begging me to clear things up and tell everyone that neither Carl nor my uncle had anything to do with me finding out about my daughter. But honestly, I don't see the point. They're the only ones who could have kept a secret like this for so long, so even if I did try to explain, I doubt anyone would believe me anyway. Most of my family hasn't been close to me for years. They haven't even bothered to talk to me in 20 years. It's almost funny how desperate they are now to protect their relationship with my uncle. But the truth is, I don't care anymore. Because of them, I missed out on 20 years of knowing my daughter. Letting them deal with the fallout feels like the least I can do after everything they've put me through. Right now, my focus is on my daughter and rebuilding what was lost. The rest of them can figure things out on their own. Update 4. Today, I finally got to meet my daughter with my family. It started off a little awkward, then got emotional, but in the end it was just really nice. Even though she was raised by two people I don't have much respect for, she's turned out to be a kind, thoughtful, and mature young woman. I don't know if it's just her nature or how she was raised, but she's clearly smart and has a good head on her shoulders. We had a long conversation about Amy and Carl, and she told me she doesn't care that they don't approve of her meeting us. Now that she knows the truth, their opinion doesn't matter as much to her. She doesn't plan to cut them out of her life completely, since they don't have any other kids besides her. But she's definitely going to take some time away from them to process everything. She also said she needs time to start building a relationship with me, which I completely understand. She's dealing with a lot right now, and I respect that she needs space to figure things out. On the bright side, she seemed to really hit it off with my wife and her half-brother. Overall, it was a great day, and I'm just grateful we got to meet and start this new chapter. During dinner, we found out something that surprised both of us. My parents, her grandparents, had stayed in touch with her all these years. She always thought it was a little strange how attached they were to her, especially since she believed they were just her grandfather's brother's family, not her actual grandparents. Now it makes sense why they were so involved in her life. But after learning the truth, both of us see them in a completely different light now. I can relate to how she's feeling, but not entirely. I'm older, so I've had more time to process things, but she's only 20. It's got to be so much harder for her to deal with the fact that the people she trusted most in her life lied to her for so long. We're both going to need time to work through this, and hopefully, things will get better as we go. We're committed to making this the best it can be, no matter how long it takes. I'm really happy with how the meeting went. My family and I both left feeling good about everything, which is a huge relief after all the chaos. Despite everything Carl, Amy, and my family have done, I'm feeling pretty positive about where things are headed. The most important thing is that we finally have a chance to make things right after all these years, and I'm going to do everything I can to make the most of it.